Dobro vam jutro, dobar dan, ja sam Vlasta, jako mi je drago što započinjemo sa novom sezonom, novom serijom razgovora sa našim autorima ovdje na Planetopijinom Instagram profilu. Zaista mi je veliko zadovoljstvo i čast što je naš današnji gost američki novinar i autor velikog svjetskog bestsellera DAH, koji će uskoro biti i u knjižarama od sljedećeg tjedna na hrvatskom jeziku. A posebno zadovoljstvo je to što je ovaj razgovor ujedno i najava Jamesovog dolaska ovdje u Zagreb 22.10. u 19 sati u Kino dvorani SC-a, kada će održati predavanje o knjizi DAH. Uskoro ćemo pozvati Jamesa. Kratka samo napomena da ulaznice za predavanje već sada možete kupiti u knjižari Planetopija. Evo, James se već uključio. Evo ga. Nadam se da će nas tehnika poslužiti. Evo.
Uh-oh, one moment.
Okay.
Okay, there I am. Okay, that works.
James.
Hello, how are you?
Great, and you?
Oh, pretty good, thanks.
So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, and I want to express our welcome here online, and especially it's super exciting to talk to you today because this talk is an introduction to your to Croatia. I just said in my little Croatian intro that on 22nd of October everyone can come here in Zagreb and listen to you talk about your wonderful book. So that's very exciting for us. You are currently on your European book tour. So how has it been so far?
It's interesting to do a book tour amidst a global pandemic, but I went for it anyway, and it turns out to be great. There's no tourists wherever I'm going. So I'm in Slovenia right now, and just came from Copenhagen before then, and it's been wonderful to go and actually meet people in person, which is something I haven't been able to do for the last couple of years because of everything.
Yes, that's what we are looking for as well. So your book has been a huge success. New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Wall Street Journal, Sunday Times UK bestseller. Did you expect it to be such a huge success when you were writing?
No, and any author knows that, you know, you hope that your mom and your friends may read the book when it comes out, but you have no idea what's going to happen after that. And we weren't even going to release the book because it so happened to be, I spent 5 years writing this book and editing this book and trying to get this book right. And it so happened to be the release date was about 6 weeks into lockdown. And of course, we had no idea, as you know, books are printed 6 months before they even come out. So we weren't going to release it, but then my editor thought that it might be a good idea to have people reconsider their breathing amidst a respiratory pandemic. And we did. So it's been a complete shock, and it's been quite a whirlwind the last 15 months, but so grateful for it. And I'm still very excited somehow to be talking about this stuff and talking about breathing and introducing this to people.
Yes, it's such a huge and important topic. And you mentioned that while you were writing the book, you kind of expect your mom and your friends to read it. So what did your mom said about the book?
She always picks out the parts that seem dangerous, and always says, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that study. Oh, you shouldn't have traveled at that time." So that's her focus on it. But it's great to hear from my friends, most of whom, just like everybody else, has a chronic respiratory issue, and that seems impossible until you look around. How many friends have asthma, or have a stuffed nose, or snore, or have sleep apnea? So the methods in the book and the research in the book has seemed to help them quite a bit. And that's the one thing I've heard more than anybody else. It's not a how-to book. It's not a self-help book. But if you can find help in it, that's great. You know, it's a scientific journey into this subject, and that's what I try to focus on.
It's kind of a why book, isn't it? It's why breathing is important and how to do it and how we do it in a wrong way.
Exactly. It's the how is very easy. Right now, I could tell you how to breathe properly. It could transform your life, right? Breathe through your nose, breathe slowly, breathe light, and breathe deep. Period. That's it. How hard is that? Not very hard. But unless you understand why breathing this way is so important, unless you understand where our ancestors came from and why we're breathing so improperly here, I don't think people will be able to appreciate it. It's the same thing with food. I could tell you, eat whole foods, don't eat processed foods. There you go. You're going to live a longer life. You're going to have far fewer diseases. But unless you understand why, I don't think it really sticks. And so that's what this book was. The how is in there. The how is very easy, but it's the why and the where and the when that I thought was a much more interesting story.
There are so many wonderful and for me surprising things to learn about breath. And what I did before our talk was two things. One was I did a little breathing exercise. I used Wim Hof method. And I know you know Wim Hof, and he recommends your book, and we published Wim Hof's book. There are many Wim Hof fans here in Croatia, and I've talked to some of them. And when I said, oh, James Nestor will come to Croatia, they were like, oh, really? That's so amazing. And I did another thing that I learned from you. I did some humming. So could you tell us a little bit why humming is important?
Sure. So it gets a little confusing to some people. I just told you to breathe slowly, breathe light through your nose. And then Wim Hof breathing is you're hyperventilating. So who's right? Everyone's right. It depends on what you're looking for. It depends on where you want to take your breath, what you want to do with your body. It's like eating different foods or different forms of exercise. And so when people get too focused on, I only breathe slow, that's the only healthy thing, or I only breathe Wim Hof, that's not the proper way of looking at this. Breath is this vast thing that we can use in so many different ways. So it's better to use it as different tools. So you know, has been my philosophy on this, because I had heard earlier coming in that some people were very specific about their breathing techniques, and I think it's much better to look at this stuff in a general way and to appreciate all the different things it can do for you.
Yes, and humming and breathing through our noses releases something, that's very important for our health and immune system, and especially now with dealing with all sorts of viruses.
Yeah, I realized I did not answer your question at all. So now I will answer your specific question. So humming, it turns out that when we hum, we release a huge profusion of this magical molecule called nitric oxide. This isn't nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas. This isn't that stuff. It's nitric oxide, NO. And what nitric oxide does is it's a very powerful vasodilator. So it dilates our blood vessels. It opens them up and helps with oxygen delivery. It also so happens that it interacts directly with viruses to kill them. And this is what Louis Ignarro, who won the Nobel Prize in the 90s for his work with nitric oxide, found. And this is why people with COVID, severe COVID, are being given nitric oxide to help them heal. Well, we can create our own nitric oxide in our noses by just breathing out of our noses, but by humming, we increase that about 15-fold. And this is one of the reasons why so many yoga techniques, why so many other prayers have you hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, and there's different pranayama practices which have you hum, sound like a bee up into the ethmoid sinuses, and they weren't looking at nitric oxide, but they knew it was doing something for you. And now we have machines that can actually measure the amount of nitric oxide that's released when we do this. So very important thing to be doing nowadays.
Yes. So who did you have in mind while writing the book, or who is this book for? I would guess, I mean, I talked to some friends and I said, oh, it's for everyone. It's for people who are in sports, like professionals or amateurs, or people who are struggling with any sort of respiratory illness that you mentioned. Who would you recommend? Who would you recommend it to? Because I think it's
if you consider breath, that we get most of our energy from air. A lot of people think we get most of our energy from food and from drink. We get some of it there, but that's one molecule of glucose. But to make energy, we need about 5 molecules per 1 molecule of glucose of oxygen. So, and if you don't believe me, hold your breath for 4 minutes and see how much energy you have. You know, you can pass out in that time. But you can go without food for a month, maybe. You can go without drink for 3 or 4 days. So, to answer your question about who is this for, I look at it at the same as it's as important as what you eat and how much you exercise. So if you're interested in those other topics, and if you've been focused on those other topics for a long time, breathing is as important as those. You cannot be healthy if you're a dysfunctional breather. I don't care what food you're eating, if you're vegan, paleo, keto, whatever, if you exercise all the time, if you are not breathing healthy, you're never going to be well. So, you know, I've heard a lot from athletes that it's helped them enormously. And I heard a lot from people with asthma, chronic respiratory issues. But the good thing about healthy breathing is there are only benefits to it. There's no negative side effects to learning how to feel better and use your breath more efficiently.
So breathing through our noses, to be led by our nose through our life, it's very, very important and kind of difficult while we talk. But then in everyday life, we kind of will balance with more breathing through our nose.
Yeah, well, you know, when I say nasal breathing, I'm talking about chronic nasal breathing, habitual nasal breathing. Right now, we're taking a few breaths through our mouths. Who cares? When you laugh, you breathe through your mouth. Sometimes when you're exercising at really extreme zones, you can start breathing through your mouth for a little. That's totally fine. But the majority of the time, and your entire time sleeping, you need to be breathing through your nose. And this seems so simple, but as a species, humans really have a hard time breathing through our noses. About 25 to 50% of the population are habitual mouth breathers. And you look into the wild, any other animal in the wild, they're breathing through their noses the whole time. And it appears that our ancestors were too, in the way that their faces have formed. So it seems so simple. It seems so kind of stupid until you understand the why behind it and the physiology and the science. And then you start to appreciate it a little more.
And all of that we will get from your book and from your lecture. So you've mentioned several times that you've done a lot of scientific research and talked to a lot of scientists. Was there something that you did not expect about the power of breath, or in other words, something that surprised you the most, how powerful breath is?
I think the thing that surprised me the most was to learn that our anatomy has changed. Our faces have changed. Our mouths have changed. I had never heard this before, and I've been writing about science for decades. But to learn that the cause of crooked teeth isn't teeth. The teeth are fine. It's the mouth that's grown too small. With that smaller mouth, you have a smaller airway, which makes it harder to breathe. And how quickly this happened to humans in just the last few hundred years. When I heard that, it blew my mind, because I thought evolution took tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, but epigenetic change happens in a single generation. That's one of the main reasons so many of us are so messed up. Our ancestors were not. And it just goes to show how quickly our environment can shape us in negative ways. Living in a modern world is wrecking our posture, it's wrecked our diets, it's wrecked our breathing, it's wrecked so much else. So it's now about finding what we've lost and trying to incorporate that into our modern living. And that's the pathway to health. And you can ask any modern doctor working today that's really doing research in this field, and they'll tell you the same thing.
And really the best thing is that we can reverse it. Yes, we can do a lot to widen our, I don't know how to say it, the airwaves. We can broaden it, we can improve our jaw and the width, and of course learn how to breathe without wanting to give too much away, because I'm really super psyched to hear you talk and to get the book. What made you interested in this topic? Because I know you wrote a book before, it's called Deep, about free diving and what the oceans tell us about ourselves. Was there already a seed planted that you looked further into the power of breath and how to breathe in the correct way?
Well, yeah, it wasn't one particular thing. It was many things that happened over so many years. It was breathing problems that I was contending with. I was getting pneumonia a lot, mild pneumonia and bronchitis. I surf a lot in San Francisco back home, and I thought it was caused by that, and it wasn't. So it was personal problems that I was looking for answers for that I could not find anywhere. And it was also from professional experience, just finding these people who were doing things that were supposed to be scientifically impossible. You're not supposed to be able to heat your body up with your breath. You're not supposed to be able to hold your breath for 8 minutes, 9 minutes, and not suffer brain damage. You're not supposed to be able to use your breath to heal yourself of chronic illnesses. All this sounds impossible until you go out in the field, meet these people, and look at the science. So it was several years to convince myself that there might be a book here. And when I brought it to my agent, she thought that a book about breathing was the stupidest idea she's ever heard. So, and she told me that. So I had to go back to my office and work on it for another 6 months and come up with a better outlook of it. And then she said, I'm not super excited about this, but it might work. And so it wasn't until the research really started with the book that I realized there was a much deeper, stranger story to be told. And that's why the book took me so long, because I had to keep starting over and over and over again.
And we are so happy and grateful that you did, because it's such a treasure, and I think it will help a lot of people to improve their breath, to improve our breath and the way we function, not only if we're dealing with any kind of illness, but mentally. I'm guessing the focus will be better, and emotionally, people who suffer from anxiety or any kind of other distress, it's hugely important. So thank you so much for writing this book, and thank you so much for visiting Croatia. So again, I will invite everyone to come on the 22nd of October here in Zagreb to listen to you talk live, because we've just been talking for, I don't know, around 15 minutes. And I hope people got the idea of what you will be talking about. So thank you very much.
Excellent.
I wish you best of luck on your tour, and see you soon in Zagreb.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in a few weeks. Bye-bye.
Yes, thank you. Bye.